Let's do this.
Let's do this. My why used to be I want to be the strongest version of me, right? Like I want to see how tough I can make myself so that I can survive. My why now is to inspire people to greatness. We don't really fight much anymore.
No.
We engage in hand-to-hand combat. Not many people run from wild animals or have to get down there in the blood and gut a wild animal after you kill it. Heck, a lot of people don't even garden and get their hands dirty, right? Failure happens, for sure. Yeah, sometimes it's because your why isn't strong enough. Sometimes it's because you give in to that primal instinct. Sometimes it's because you're underprepared. But yeah, it certainly is a reality. Psilocybin on the beach, and I'm going through a massive rebranding of my business and what it is that I want to build, how many people that I want to inspire. And my intention was to ask myself if I really was ready to do that. And I just remember opening my arms and saying, I'm open to being big. I'm open to greatness. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and yet loses his soul, right? So ultimately, when we talk about anything from physical to mental superiority, what things really come down to is what's inside you, your spirit, your soul.
The ultimate biohack, maximizing your soul. This week we have the legendary triathlete, biohacker, businessman, Mr. Ben Greenfield back in the studio. And he came on and really talked about what it's like on his journey and also where he is now and where he is going forward. Talked about some of the failures he had as a triathlete and what he learned from them, which is the kind of stuff we love at London Real. And he also talked about how he's going to be expanding his business and how he really had a deep conversation with himself on the beaches of Hawaii to find out whether it was time for him to really go forward and really give more of himself to the world. And I think it's something we all think about as entrepreneurs, as business people, as people with a message. You know, are we really ready to let go and to let it really flow and to put ourselves out there and go even beyond? And I think that's when you know that you have something truly special, is when it no longer becomes your business or your brand. It's just who you are and what you can give back to the world in terms of value, in terms of inspiration. And it's something that we aspire to here at London Real as well. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Ben Greenfield, who is an Ironman triathlete, obstacle course racer, human performance consultant, speaker, and author of the New York Times Bestseller, Beyond Training, Mastering Endurance, Health, and Life. In 2013 and 14, you were named as one of the top 100 most influential people in health and fitness. You live in a custom-built, biohacked ranch with your wife and twin boys, complete with spear-throwing obstacle course where you bow hunt wild animals while running naked. Ben, welcome back to London Real.
What's up, man? And you have me drinking coffee at night, you devil.
Kind of late afternoon, but yeah.
I'm a fast coffee oxidizer, though. I can, there's the rule that you're not supposed to drink coffee within like 4 hours of bedtime because it disrupts your melatonin production, your sleep cycles. But you can get like a salivary test, and you can find out if you're a fast or a slow caffeine oxidizer. And I'm a fast oxidizer, which is good and bad, right? It means that if I have a cup of coffee, I go, but then it wears off. So
you're known for so many things because you could deep dive into all of those nuances of what's in that cup right now, which is you've got all those biohacks.
I don't know. I don't know what you put in that cup.
Yeah, that's true. It's mostly good. But then also you've got another foot in this natural living camp where you don't quantify everything. And I was just wondering if you could, for people that don't know you that well, if you could describe kind of the natural living half of Ben and then the biohacking side of Ben, because they're very different, but you kind of live them both, right?
I have nothing against better living through science, right? So I look at everything through the lens of whether it increases mental and physical performance, but whether it also does or does not fly in the face of longevity and anti-aging or just overall health. So when it comes to ancestral living, like you mentioned, you called it a ranch. I don't really live I've got a bunch of chickens and goats, but it's not like I'm out there. Spread, but I'm not corralling cattle, riding a stallion.
You have an obstacle course. You've got a house you designed with.
And I don't own any leather riding chaps or spurs. But yeah, the home is out in the middle of the forest, right? So I'll wander naked through the forest in the morning and find something to eat for breakfast and pick some nettles and some wild mint and go to our raised garden beds and collect some kale and cilantro and go inside and make myself a smoothie. And that's certainly a component of ancestral living. And I'll shoot the wild turkey with my bow, and I'm an avid deer hunter, and I'll hunt elk, and I'll be going on a moose and a bear hunt in a couple of months. And so I love that side of connecting with your primal man or woman. But at the same time, I'll take all those weeds from outside indoors, and I'll put things like ant extract and C8 brain octane and things that you might not consider to be ancestral, but that might be more biohacky, right? And I'm doing so under the lights in my office, which are hacked for enhanced blue light production, versus the lights in my bedroom, which are hacked for enhanced red light production or the absence of blue light. And so, I think that really what it comes down to is when you are making a decision about whether you're going to use, say, like a biohack, for example, you simply need to look at the research and see whether or not it would be something that actually has good long-term research behind it. Like I've been experimenting lately with pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, which is actually what cell phones produce, right?
Okay.
And you'll see the warning, they talk about now that you've seen the warning label on cell phones, right?
I've never read them.
It's there, right? It's not as bad as the one on cigarettes, but the idea is you're supposed to keep your cell phone, if it's not in airplane mode, away from your body. It's something like an inch. I don't remember the exact distance, but the idea behind that is that it produces this pulsed electromagnetic frequency that could potentially be associated with things like cancer or leakage in your blood-brain barrier, which can cause toxins and things like that to wind up in neural tissue. But the idea is that that you can also get pulsed electromagnetic field devices that don't produce the same frequency as a cell phone. And if you look at the research behind those, they do things like simulate the type of frequency that the Earth might emit. Or like, have you heard of grounding or earthing? Like people using grounding mats or earthing mats.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Like Tour de France cyclists use them for a long time, and now they sell them for people to use in their homes. But there's devices too. Like I used one that I put on my collarbone, and it sends this very, very light frequency signal through what's called my brachial plexus, which is up in the shoulder. And that basically travels up into the brain and causes your brain to release delta waves, right?
And your house is actually hacked to block out electromagnetic waves, right? Or you don't have Wi-Fi?
You have to be careful. People have asked about that, like, it's basically like a Faraday cage, right? Like you can line your home with special, it's like a sheet basically that will block out.
But yours isn't.
The problem is if you make a phone call inside that, you're essentially you've built a giant microwave, right? So my home is not shielded, but it has certain things that reduce my exposure to dirty electricity, or what might be called electrical pollution. So for example, there is no Wi-Fi in my home. It pisses off people when they come over because they can't get a signal, because the entire home it's hardwired with Cat5 shielded Ethernet cable. So if you go into a room and you want to access the internet, rather than having a Wi-Fi signal bouncing around the room, you just plug the cable into the wall. And I mean, if there's obviously a lot of people can't just go build a home and put cable through the walls, or rip out their walls and put cable in, but there are little things you can do, right? Like you can buy for $20 or $30 off Amazon a digital wall timer, which means that you plug it into any outlet in your home, and then you set it on a timing. So you can say, I want this particular, whatever's plugged into this outlet, I want it to turn off at 10 p.m. and then turn on again at 6 a.m.
So, that could be
so at least your Wi-Fi's off when you're sleeping.
Right.
But yeah, like when I check into a hotel room, like, you know, I'm here in London, you know, I go through the entire hotel room and just unplug as many things as possible. And I try to find the Wi-Fi and unplug that before I fall asleep, just because, it does affect you. To return to your original question, I like the biohacking type of stuff, but I'm careful with especially like the electrical, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth components. You know, I'm not wearing
that's
an Apple Watch, for example.
Yeah, and I go on airplane mode at night now for a variety of reasons. I think your brain, the phone shouldn't be really in the room and on, because your brain thinks it's on. And the whole red light, blue light stuff, it's definitely something people should explore. The light around them at all times. I use Flux on my Macs. Now the Apple iPhone now has.
Yeah, they added that to the iOS. Yeah. Although I do sleep with my phone next to me.
You do?
It's in airplane mode, but I use binaural beats when I sleep. Have you heard of these?
Yeah.
It plays one frequency in one ear
while
and
you
one
sleep.
frequency in the other. And I use them while I sleep. You know, you can use them for focus, and you know, like when I'm writing like fiction, for example, I like to have like just everything blocked out. But you can put them in when you sleep. I'm a side sleeper, so I use these. There's a company called Sleep Phones. They make like a very soft headset that wraps around your ears, so the bud isn't like poking into your ears as you sleep.
Okay.
I have this whole system, and then I have this Sleep Master sleep mask. It's like it just wraps around and envelops your whole head and blocks out all the light. And then I plug it into this cheap ass iPhone app that pumps out binaural beats. It's called Sleep Stream.
Okay,
and
all night long.
I just put
Is
that
it really
on.
light? It'd be like.
It's very light.
Okay.
It's like a DJ for sleep, right? You can have like soft piano pieces come on, or you could do like white noise, rain, thunder, fan.
Yeah, I used to play with that rain.
Yeah.
And that sleep mask, I know Tim Ferriss was like recommending one at point. It kind of goes all the way around your head.
The way around.
I've got one of those.
Yeah.
And when I put it on my head and go to the bathroom, I look like I have a turban on.
Yeah.
My daughter finds that kind of funny.
Yeah, I think we probably have the same one, because
Yeah.
it's huge. Like when you're on the airplane and you walk to the back, I mean, it's like you have a giant hat on.
Yeah.
I love it though.
It's kind of a cool look.
It's very therapeutic. You feel like you're just cradled in a giant silky
Yeah, and
mask.
with sleep masks normally, especially once you get on the plane, they go over your ears and they don't work through the night.
They're crap. They're built
yeah.
for people with very small heads.
Yeah, it doesn't work. And you can get all of this biohacking stuff. By the way, Ben has an amazing podcast. You've written so many articles, so much evergreen content over the years as far as all this biohacking stuff. And I want to get into your morning routine a little bit later. But I also want to find out about your journey, because you started off as a bodybuilder. And you started off as a guy that was then the Ironman guy who was doing the usual thing, eating all the carbs and doing all that stuff. You weren't always biohacker Ben and natural living Ben. Can you tell me about kind of that guy and some of the things you learned over the years to make you who you are now?
You could make an argument that I've been a biohacker for a while, because look at bodybuilding, right? It's like the most bro science-y sport that there is. I mean, I just wrote an article. I've been injecting myself with peptides, like doing self-injections with peptides. And most of what I learned, I had to learn on bodybuilding forums, because it's this complete underground science.
It is amazing.
No, I inject subcutaneously with peptides.
Okay.
So like I use something called BPC 157.
Okay.
It's not not sold for human consumption or human use. You can only get it from research laboratory websites, but you can inject, like I inject my hamstring intramuscularly, and it was like healed within 5 days.
And you got that info off the bodybuilding sites?
You get it, you get bacteriostatic water, you it's
okay.
Crazy.
Just something on bro science really quick. I had Mike Dolce here last week, and we were talking about bro science, because he gets accused of bro science all the time, and he's like, bodybuilders were the original bro science. And I had Dorian Yates in here, and he was 6-time Mr. Olympia.
If you want to strip fat off your body,
right,
as low as you need to go, which is far lower than what I would ever argue would be healthy, right? When we're talking about like health versus performance, that's performance at the cost of health.
Yeah.
Right. Like when I was bodybuilding, I was just a giant piece of muscle with no sex drive and low testosterone, 3% body fat. I was about 40 pounds heavier than I am now, and would just lay on the couch, hit the gym in the morning, hit the gym in the evening. This was during my last year of college, so I would study during the day.
And you learned all that from the bro science, which is just what was passed down through the gym, right?
Already tapping into some creatine and what kind of sets and reps work best for lowering body fat, and intermittent fasting and all. This was 10 years ago, and then I pivoted, and I've always been someone who excels at absolutely nothing, right? But I like to dabble in a lot of things. I've always loved to just pick up and try new things. So I wanted to try triathlon. I went to an Ironman triathlon and I watched it, and I was like, dude, I have to try one.
This is when you were still bodybuilding?
I was still bodybuilding.
Okay.
So I actually entered into an Olympic distance triathlon when I was still bodybuilding. It was like the most painful run of my life during that race, because my tits were bouncing up and down. It was just because I still had all that bodybuilding muscle. There's a picture somewhere way back on my computer. It was even before Facebook, that long ago. But anyways, it was very, very painful. But
different body type.
Transition from bodybuilding into Ironman, but both are like, bodybuilding is the extreme of nutrition and muscle building and fat loss, and Ironman is the extreme of endurance, performance, and nutrition. And so I was very interested in science, and my master's degree is in biomechanics and exercise physiology.
Okay. So you've been picking up little bits of this science over the years. When you're weightlifting, you picked it up from the guys in the gym. And my point about bro science was, Dorian Yates was in the 80s in this dark gym in Birmingham, and he hacked himself into be the greatest human specimen for 6 years in a row, and he did it all through trial and error on his own, which is kind of crazy.
I actually wish that I could, and I've thought about it before, right? Like dial back the clock with what I know now, and actually go back and try to pack on as much muscle as possible. Because back then it was just like, lift heavy shit and take creatine and drink the protein shakes that come in the can.
Yeah.
And a little bit of tuna fish. That's it.
Yeah.
So, and then I did Ironman, and as you alluded to, neither sport is necessarily healthy. And for me, it was 5-6 years ago when I started to discover that there is a big distinction between performance and health, right? Like carbohydrates, for example, they definitely enhance endurance performance, and they enhance glycolytic performance overall, but at what cost? Right, like when you frequently spike blood glucose, or you're eating the 50 to 70% carbohydrate-based diet,
typical American diet,
we're recommended to eat. Healthy whole grains and whole wheat bread, which can spike your insulin levels higher than a candy bar, and frequent spikes in blood glucose. So you're dumping a bunch of sugar into your bloodstream along with cholesterol, and the sugar sticks to the cholesterol, which becomes atherosclerotic. And there's all these issues, and we could talk for hours about all the studies that have been done on the chronic health disease risks of not processed sugar alone, but just high carbohydrate consumption, period. Fluctuations in blood glucose from carbohydrates, or even from protein becoming gluconeogenic or turning into glucose.
And this is clean carbs, as you were talking.
And so, when I was doing bodybuilding, I didn't know about any of this, but I was unhealthy. I would go to these conventions, and people look really good in spandex, and then you get up close and there's like wrinkles, and there's all these signs of advanced glycation end products, which can cause connective tissue damage as sugars stick to proteins and they're heated during metabolic activity. And
they don't look great a lot of times.
No, not close up.
Not close up.
But neither do triathletes, right? Like you look at triathletes close up.
They look
you look at some of them far away, right? And they're emaciated, and a lot of the muscle is lost, and a big part of it is just inflammation. A big part of it is hypercortisolism. I began to study my own body, as blood and biomarker testing became more readily available. There's companies now that will do, everything from blood drop testing to home test kits for blood and saliva.
Well, you got me
and
to
urine
test my blood
and stool. Did you test?
Yeah, I did test, and I got your doctor friend Tamsin,
here in the UK.
Yeah, so she did my whole thing.
She's speaking with me. We're on a panel at the Biohacking Summit this weekend.
Summit, okay, that's why you're here, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
So thanks for that, by the way. It took me like a year to finally get around to it, but it was
Did you find out? Are you pregnant?
Yeah, I'm pregnant, I'm old,
Yeah.
no. But like, it was very thorough, and like, I've seen a lot of, not bro science, but I think I've seen a lot of science, and I know my science pretty well, just from being an engineer, that doesn't look like science, but this was a very comprehensive piece where even I was like, okay, I buy this stuff, and it was, 8 different levels of looking at my blood, and a lot of it seemed to make sense, and I felt like I knew a lot more.
Right.
And I was only one test.
One test, right?
Yeah.
And so I test my blood now 4 to 6 times a year. And starting off, to return back to the triathlon and pivoting from performance into health.
Yeah.
I found out high HSCRP, a sign of muscle inflammation. High homocysteine, a sign of vascular inflammation. High cortisol, low thyroid, low T3, showing like that any thyroid your body is making isn't getting converted into its active form. High sex hormone binding globulin, which basically is how your body shuts down fertility and libido, because that binds to any testosterone that you might be making, rendering you less fertile. All the things that your body does when you are A, eating inflammatory foods, and B, training improperly, like not recovering the right way, etc. And so you put that stuff together, and you can have somebody who looks good with their shirt off or in spandex, or somebody who's like, doing an 8.5 or a 9-hour Ironman triathlon, but who isn't really healthy.
Okay. And you got to that point. So
that's when I got to that point. That's when I started researching more of the biohacking, more of the supplementation, more of how to shut down inflammation, more of ketosis, right? And keeping the body in a state of ketone utilization rather than glucose utilization. That's when I wrote my book about, all these things that go beyond training. And that's when I really started to delve into.
How do you feel about carbs now? If you had to give someone the 2-minute Ben Greenfield take on carbs, I'm sure it's changed. Well, obviously it's changed since the triathlon days and the bodybuilding days. How do you feel in general now? I know it's a very general question, but
well, that's why I'll probably never write a diet book, because when people ask me that, the answer is it completely depends. For example, it depends on your production of salivary amylase, meaning how well you're able to begin carbohydrate digestion in your mouth, which influences how much insulin your pancreas creates in response to that carbohydrate that you consume. That's all genetic. You can do a salivary DNA profile through, here in the UK, it's DNA Fit. In the US, it's 23andMe. But you can get a salivary genetic sample. You can see what your ancestors ate. You can see what type of genes you have that are responsible for things like increased type 2 diabetes risk or salivary amylase production. And you can tweak your diet or your macronutrient ratios, your carb, fat, protein ratios accordingly.
And so we're all that different. Like, people have that much of a variation.
We're extremely different. Now, when we look at, say, you and me, we're probably, I don't think either of us are Kenyan or Ethiopian or Sub-Saharan African or Southeast Asian.
Right.
Just looking at us, I doubt it.
Right.
So we're going to respond differently to rice and bananas, right?
Okay.
And you tend to see, from an ancestral standpoint, somewhere in the range of like 50 to 60% fats, around 20 to 30% protein. And depending on the day's level of physical activity, somewhere in the range of like 10 to 30% carbohydrate. Now, I don't completely eschew carbohydrates. My wife makes a fantastic slow fermented sourdough bread from a local non-GMO wheat that grows on the Palouse in the Northwest, and it's
how dare you, Ben Greenfield?
And I do that, and I do rice. So I have bread every day. I have rice. I'm
bread
paleo.
Okay.
We milk our goats. We do goat milk.
Okay.
Yeah, all this stuff.
Okay.
But the idea is it's all about when you put it into your body. So my personal diet is cyclic ketosis.
Okay.
What I mean by that is I keep my body in a state of full ketone utilization.
For people that don't know what ketosis is, can you give them a general quick?
Sure. It's just a molecule that your body naturally produces when it burns fatty acids, when it goes through a process called beta oxidation, which is the burning of fatty acids. A byproduct of that, dumped out during the cycle of burning fats, is what are called ketones.
Okay.
Your liver, your heart, your diaphragm, your brain, they can all use ketones very effectively as a fuel without creating the same type of inflammation as glucose can. So I try to keep myself in that state because it's advantageous not just for cognitive performance, but also, I'm still competing professionally in obstacle course racing, for example. So for me to be able to go for long periods of time burning my own fat, that's advantageous. It's advantageous when I'm hunting. It's advantageous for a variety of purposes. When you're traveling, like I do all the time, and you don't want to eat the airplane food or the airport food.
And it's better than carbing up, having that ketosis state when you're obstacle.
So I carb up. I do carb up.
You do carb up.
I do because almost everything I do is glycolytically demanding, right?
Okay.
Like I'm not doing Ironman anymore. I'm doing sports where you're redlined much of the time.
Okay.
My workouts
Ironman is more
might
steady.
be right. Like a workout for me might be a 10 by 500 meter row with deadlifts and squats in between each. And so that's glycolytically demanding. So what I do is
high heart rate, short duration.
And this is where the cyclic part of cyclic ketosis comes in.
Okay.
I'm burning ketones all day long, teaching my body how to be a fat burning machine. And then in the evening, and I work out in the evening. My primary workout is in the evening because that's when testosterone peaks. It's when reaction time peaks. It's when what's called your post-workout protein synthesis peaks. It's when the body is most primed for a hard workout. And I have several hours after that workout during which these transporters called GLUT4 transporters, these take carbohydrates that you eat and they allow those carbohydrates to be shoved into muscle tissue rather than partitioned into fat. And so I will time my wine intake and my rice intake and that really, really good sourdough bread intake and all that stuff in the evening. Right, somewhere in the window of time after that workout, not 20 minutes, I don't go make myself a shake right after, but at some point, within 2 or 3 hours after that workout. And that refuels my muscles' glycogen stores for the next day's activity.
Okay. And so you'll have carbs every day, but it's that cycle that you don't have them in the morning.
I have some clients I coach who aren't as active as me that will do refeeds once a week sometimes in that case, but I do every day. And
wine, you stuck wine in there. You like your wine.
Oh, I'm on board with the wine. Glass of wine a day. Really interesting studies on coffee and wine, and I've become far more open to that over the years. Wine, I drink a biodynamically farmed organic wine that passes through a very strict filtration process. Grapes grown at high altitude for enhanced antioxidants. It ferments for longer, which is a big bonus because you not only get less sugar, but you also get more alcohol. And I'm not drinking wine for anything except spinning the dials in my brain and decreasing stress at the end of the day.
Okay.
There's some antioxidant benefits, but I could just take a resveratrol capsule, right, if I want.
And you're drinking like a glass.
Yeah, like
red wine.
Pretty
big glass?
red, big glass.
Big glass.
I do that. So I open it up. I beat the shit out of it, which is I think originally a Tim Ferriss trick where you take the latte frother and you froth the wine. So rather than having to decant it and leave it there all day, you froth it for about 60. And I don't even do it.
Pump air into it.
I taught my kids when they were 5 how to open a bottle of wine. So they open the wine, they get the latte frother, they froth it for me, they bring it to me because I usually
all frothed up.
Right, I write at the end of the day. So I'll sit there and I'll write this fiction book that I'm working on, and I'll sip my wine. And so I do a glass of wine every day, and then coffee. There's a Harvard medical researcher who I just interviewed for my podcast, and I'll have that one out soon. But we talk about the research that goes into the fact that 4 to 6 cups of coffee a day can decrease risk of Alzheimer's, diabetes, enhance neural function, lower blood glucose. There's all sorts of effects.
It's a lot of coffee.
So I do a couple of big ass cups of coffee.
In the evening too?
In the morning.
In the morning, okay.
In the morning.
Okay.
I will do coffee afterwards, like in the evening, but I'll use like a decaffeinated, so you're still getting a lot of the antioxidants, you're getting a lot of the tannins, but you won't get the caffeine.
Okay.
And usually, like if I were doing what I was doing right now, having a cup of coffee with you in the evening, even though, like I mentioned, I'm a fast coffee oxidizer, you can mix it with something called L-theanine. And L-theanine decreases the wakefulness enhancing properties of caffeine. So you can keep like L-theanine capsules handy, or green tea is a perfect combination of a natural combination of theanine and caffeine. But I do coffee, I do wine.
Okay, back to the wine. Talk to me about it for cognitive enhancement, creativity. They say you should write drunk and edit sober. Is that how you do your creative writing?
The problem, so here's the problem.
Everything I've written when I've been drunk has been rubbish.
I like to write fiction. So I do all of my left brain, because I write a lot. I've
always written a lot, right?
Most of my writing ever since I was a kid. I've written, like I do, for our websites, and I do all the copywriting, I do all the article writing. We don't have any ghostwriters. I write every day on airplanes.
You have a great looking website, by the way, bengreenfield.com.
bengreenfieldfitness.com.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. I love it. I show our business accelerator students. I'm like, this is what your website should look like.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's cool. Respect.
Good to know.
But sorry, back to your copywriting.
So the idea with the writing is I'll do the left brain stuff in the morning, just because I know how I'm wired. Some people are more creative in the morning. I'm more productive in the morning. I'm more creative in the evening.
Okay. Your manager mode is in the morning. Your maker mode in the evening.
And now I've been because I can stand and I can pace, and I actually just put it up on Snapchat. How I write, I'll walk the room, especially if I'm not at home on my little treadmill workstation. I'll walk the room. I use a headset. It's called a Jabra 930 headset. It's made by this company called Jabra, and it attaches to my head, and then the other end plugs into my computer. And I dictate using Dragon dictation as I'm walking and pacing the room, and that allows me to write without being in this hunched over typing position.
And you have it corded.
And that's a new thing for me. I've only been doing that for about 6 months.
With the dictated.
But oh man.
Have you done the voice dictation for a while, or is that a new thing?
I've done the voice dictation for a while, but using Dragon dictation with this, voice dictation is it's highly erroneous, right? You're always having to go back and edit words, and you want to punch your fist through the computer sometimes because it'll misspell half of the things that you type. But this Bluetooth headset with Dragon dictation, which you have to train, right? You have to train your computer for like 3 or 4 months until it gets to the point where it can recognize your words. And, and so, I'll be talking, to you, Brian Rose, period.
So you will say that.
Select Brian Rose, cap that. Unselect.
That's how you do.
New paragraph. So you got to learn all the lingo.
So you're
and everything.
editing on the way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But the wine, I'll drink the glass of wine at night and then start into the fiction. But the problem with wine is that it's calorie laden. So you do have to be careful. For me, I have to move my ass up hills really quickly. Doing these races, and so I do watch my weight. I purposefully keep myself lean. Okay. I have a voracious appetite and I want to eat everything, but I keep myself lean because I have to for running. I'm 10, 15 pounds below my ideal body weight.
What do you weigh?
My body wants to be at. I'm about 175.
Okay.
So,
and when you write fiction, do you dictate it as well? Or is that mostly for your prose?
I dictate the fiction as well.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
And the problem with wine is a lot of people have that one glass of wine and then they start making bad decisions about their diet or the second and fourth glass of wine.
Right. Well, we were talking about this before the show. So I'll do the wine. Yeah. I've got a few tricks that I'll use in addition to cyclic ketosis to keep myself from gaining weight from that type of carbohydrate. Okay. There's 3 different extracts that I'll use to either increase insulin sensitivity or decrease the blood glucose response to a meal, and to further enhance the upregulation of those GLUT4 transporters I was talking about that shove carbohydrate into muscle tissue.
Okay.
Cinnamon is one. So almost every time I have a cup of coffee, I'll put a couple teaspoons of cinnamon in, a lot of cinnamon. Like I'm chewing it out of the bottom of the cup.
In addition to the vanilla, you're pushing all these things.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't even talk about vanilla on this, but vanilla is a great cognitive enhancer. That's my. If I do a cup of quote unquote bulletproof coffee, I do vanilla. I do the dark cacao powder, I do the coffee, and I do a little bit of the C8. So it's a much lower calorie cup of coffee, lower in triglycerides, but the vanilla and the chocolate and the C8 together really spin your brain dials.
Okay. But the wine and the bad decisions with the wine, do you just tell your clients just do the one glass?
You just do the one glass, but you use the cinnamon during the day.
Okay.
That's one.
Right.
Apple cider vinegar taken at about 1 to 2 tablespoons prior to a meal acts very similarly to cinnamon. And we're talking about lowering blood glucose and increasing insulin sensitivity. And then a bitter melon extract is another one. This acts very similarly to the diabetic drug metformin in terms of how much it can shove what's called your postprandial blood glucose down.
so much so that you don't want to take it before a workout because you'll go hypoglycemic before a workout. But before my biggest meal of the day, before I drink alcohol, etc., I'll use that in addition to that workout trick at the end of the day that I talked about.
Okay.
And then because you do have to drink a certain amount of wine to really truly get into that mode that you talked about, how writers, they write drunk and edit sober.
Yeah.
I use cannabidiol. In my state, THC is legal.
Right, Washington State, right.
I use CBD mixed with THC, so the CBD takes like the psychoactive paranoia edge off the THC, and so I'll do THC, but I'll combine it with cannabidiol capsules, and then I still have to be careful when I take THC because it's technically it's banned by the World Anti-Doping Association.
Right, so you can't compete in races.
I can't do that during race season, but I can do CBD, which is legal anywhere in the world as long as it's from industrial hemp.
Okay.
And then I'll use that along with the wine, and that way you get a little bit of both.
What about THC and biohacking? I mean, people don't really talk about that much. The biohackers usually stay away from the marijuana and the THC, but these days in states like Washington and Colorado where it's legal, and then like another 30-some states where it's medically legal.
Yeah.
Should we start having that conversation more? And
the CB1 and CB2 receptors, I mean, we produce all our own endogenous endocannabinoids. THC, in my opinion, is just better living through ancestral plant medicine, right? When you're using something like that to shut down inflammation or to enhance creativity or to decrease salivary cortisol. I mean, there's a lot of things that most forms of a hemp extract or a cannabis extract can do.
Okay.
The problem is, of course, all of the little things that go along with overuse. A little bit of a reduction of gray matter if overused, especially when you're under the age of 18.
Okay.
The appetite sparking component, which can kind of backfire on you if you're using THC at night and you get the munchies.
Okay. Which is real.
Which is real. It really happens. This is where cannabidiol or CBD, it's an antagonist of some of those effects of THC. So if you use something rich in CBD or you combine CBD with THC, you don't get a lot of those effects. But there are a ton of benefits of that actual plant. You just have to be careful with overuse. But yeah, anti-inflammatory benefits, reduction in salivary cortisol.
There's a lot of weed being smoked in America, right?
And I don't smoke. Anything you burn, especially if you're an athlete, that is going to affect your alveolar function in your lungs. So if I'm going to use something like that, to be honest with you, I get a high grain alcohol and I have a industrial grade blender, like an immersion blender.
Okay.
And I will purchase the weed that I want to use, whatever strain I want, depending on the effect that I want, a sativa, an indica, a hybrid, whatever. I'll decarboxylate it, meaning I'll cook it in the oven at about 200 degrees or so for 40 to 60 minutes.
Okay, but that doesn't release the...
Grind it. That decarboxylation means you're removing a carboxyl group from the bud, and that's what renders the THC actually active.
Okay.
And from there, I will blend it with high grain alcohol for 12 hours. So you get a very, very potent extract. The end product is a tincture, which you can put under your tongue and you can hold for 90 seconds. And you don't have to vape, you don't have to smoke, you don't have to go purchase weed, anything like that. And you're not getting the effects of smoking. You're not getting, I personally, I've got kids at home. I don't necessarily want to be sitting there in front of a vape with my kids because then I have to answer a lot of awkward questions in front of them that they may not understand at this point because they're 8 years old.
Yeah.
I trust them to open the wine and to do the wine immersion for me, but we don't talk a lot about weed. So I'll do a tincture and then I'll combine that with like a CBD capsule.
Okay, and a couple drops under the tongue.
Like a dropper. So the way that I mix it up is so that, and it's very simple math. Let's say you're going to decarboxylate 3 buds of weed and wind up with 3 grams that you're then putting in the immersion blender. Once you actually put that into a dropper bottle, like 1 dropper full winds up at it being about 2.5 milligrams or so, which is basically like microdosing with, so you could microdose with it, or you could do like 4 dropper fulls and have 10 milligrams of weed and feel really good. Okay. So.
When will you have
I am not a pothead, by the way. But you
know
got me on the topic. So
when will you have that conversation with your twin boys at 8 years old about weed? Because I get questions from Gabby. She's 12 about like, why isn't alcohol a drug? Because it makes people fall over. And like, when do you have that conversation with them?
Because
they'll always know sooner than you think.
I've had shreds of that conversation But when we step back and look at this from, when we look at the forest for the trees, the idea is that you never want to tell your children, in my opinion, not to do something. You want to enable them with the education that allows them to feel empowered to make that decision about whether or not they are going to do something. For example, my kids know that concentrated gluten, right? Not what you find in mom's sourdough bread, but what you find in cupcakes at your friend's birthday party, or in the bread from the taco part of the cafeteria at school, or what you might find in terms of like the allergenic proteins in dairy that you might get from the milk at your friend's house. Those are bad for your gut. They can make you stupid the next day in school because they can create inflammation in your brain. They can even keep you from gaining muscle. You get to decide if you want to have the cupcake. You get to decide if you want to have the cup of commercial pasteurized, homogenized milk. But I tell them it's going to make you stupid. It's not going to allow your muscles to grow as fast. Dad, can I have this wine? Well, technically, if you are still young and your liver is still growing, that wine can affect your liver, and your liver is what helps the rest of your body to get rid of any nasty things that you put into it. So if you ruin your liver by drinking this when you're young, it's going to affect you when you're older. So we have to wait for you to drink this until your liver is bigger, right? And then they know.
Do they
and
buy into
technically,
most
if they
of these?
wanted to steal a bottle of wine and bring it, I mean, it's all there. They know how to
tastes
open it. They know
horrible
how to
anyways.
drink it, everything. But they also know that they have this very precious organ called a liver, and they have to wait until that thing is fully grown.
Okay.
All sorts of things like that. What's another one that we've talked about? Coffee and bone mineral, right? Like I've taught them that coffee, until your bones are fully formed and your osteophytes are done building all that new bone, coffee has been shown to decrease bone mineral density in kids. So they know that they can have coffee, and they've sipped coffee and they've sipped wine. They haven't vaped, but they've tried these things a little bit.
Okay.
But they know, right? Like if you have the cup of coffee with dad at the breakfast table, you're going to have weak bones when you grow up.
Right. Okay.
And you make the decision.
And they're on the page now. They're 8
so far they make
now.
pretty good decisions.
Yeah, wait till they're
Occasionally
12.
they'll grab the cupcake and they'll have it, but they'll tell me,
Okay.
like, Dad, I had gluten at the birthday party. I don't think I'm going to do that again for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And I'm with you. And I have these same conversations with my daughter. I'm just like, look, this is the deal with alcohol and drugs and all these things. And they make some people do this and some people do this. And you're going to experience people that do these things and their choices that they make. And this is what's going to happen. And I'm not telling you not to do it. You'll make that decision.
And I wasn't raised that way.
Right.
Like I was homeschooled K through 12. I grew up in a very conservative family. My first experience with alcohol was stealing a bottle of scotch from my dad's office. I mean, like,
What age? 15?
Oh gosh, I think I was 13, 14,
Yeah.
Drunk and in my bedroom, and it's, I think that the whole forbidden fruit approach to parenting is not a healthy
It's
way
not
to
an
go.
option these days with a mobile phone. I mean, they can have access to porn, information,
Anything.
drug stuff. It's like they got
Anything.
anything.
Yeah.
So you might as well just empower them to make some good decisions.
Exactly. Like I tell my kids, I forget, can we curse on your show?
Yes.
Okay, so my kids know what fuck means. They know what shit means. They know what all these words mean.
Right.
They know 20 different words for their dick, but they know, for example, they're not supposed to talk about their penis in front of girls because that can be an uncomfortable topic in many social situations. Or they know that fuck is a word that you use in specific situations, but most of the time it's not an appropriate term to use at school. And so again, you educate your children, you teach them about these things, then you let them make the decision.
Right, the old school way.
They're going to find out about it anyways.
Yeah, we were kind of raised with the you don't ever say that, and you don't do that, and
yeah,
you
me
don't,
too.
which is just not very realistic.
Yeah.
And then they're going to want to do the opposite.
Oh, we had a freaking squeeze box on our TV that would, I mean, my parents bought the thing for the TV that when somebody curses, it blocks it out.
Really?
And so all of us boys would gather around the TV and we'd watch people's lips, then we'd figure out what they were saying, and then we'd go look up that word and become infatuated with it and start to use it. And so it's, it
look
all
how
backfires.
look how you turned out, right?
Yeah.
Ben, one of the things I like about you is that when you come here, you talk about your successes, but you also talk about some failures and things that you've learned from those things. And I wanted you to tell me about some experiences you had in the last couple of years, like the world's toughest mudder.
Oh,
and
gosh.
yeah, I know. And the Ironman championships that you did in some extreme heat. where you're always a guy that's pushing yourself all the time. And I remember last time you were here, you were talking about some crazy triathlons you were doing where
I think we were talking about the Navy SEAL, Kokora.
That, we did that, and then also times when you were on a bicycle, you had no business being on there on some of these races. And I like the fact, and I want to talk about the SEAL training too after this, but you know, you're always pushing yourself into situations that sometimes you maybe shouldn't even be on these races, and you're doing it. Can you tell me what you learned from the Toughest Mudder and from that Ironman championships, and what your mindset change was after that?
Well, let's start with the championships, I guess. That was I forget the year, but it was the half Ironman World Championships in Vegas. I do not DNF races. I finish what I start.
What does DNF mean?
DNF means did not finish.
Did not finish, okay. Which is a big bad thing in the competing world.
But I think that almost everybody who says that they DNF or that they do not DNF, at some point in their life they have DNF'd and they know what that feels like. And that was the time, I think that was 2013, something like that, that I had that experience. So Vegas, super hot. They had this race and it was like 103, 104 degrees by the time we got out there on the run course. And I made the mistake of booking a posh hotel that was right on the run course. And the run course was a multi-loop course, right? So I do the swim, and I do the bike, and I had actually won the previous year gold for the USA in the long course world championships on a similar course, not in that heat though. And so I thought I was gonna own the day because this was, you know, same location in Vegas, and I was ready to rumble.
Did you train accordingly, as in you thought you were gonna win it? Or was your training pretty good up till
My training was good.
Okay.
You know, I've even since then, I've learned a lot about sauna and heat acclimation and all sorts of little heat hacks that you can use to do even better in the heat, you know, from colostrum to glycerin and all sorts of things.
Okay.
But either way, in that race.
Well, one of the things you said before you jump in about a race is you have to know your why for each race.
Absolutely.
Which I think most people don't think, because they look at Ben and they're like, Ben just does everything to the max. But like every race has a different why and a different point in your life, right?
Every race has a why at a different point in your life, and I'll touch on that, and then I'll get back to the championship. What I mean by that is my why used to be I want to be the strongest version of me, right? Like I want to see how tough I can make myself so that I can survive. I'm a little bit of a prepper, right? At home I've got guns and gold and silver and ammo and solar and all these things that would allow me to survive the Chinese attacking or a zombie apocalypse, right? Okay. And I like that feeling of just being a guy who's ready for anything.
You just feel better about yourself.
And that used to be my, you know, before that was I just wanted to do an Ironman. Like I want to cross the finish line like those people I've seen on TV, and that was enough of a why. And then it moved into I want to be the strongest version of me and be ready for anything. And now I feel like I've reached that point, knock on wood, where I feel like I could get through just about anything that gets thrown at me. You know, I've done 50-hour races at 38 degrees below zero. I've done the full Hell Week thing with Mark Devine's Navy SEAL program. I've put myself through some of the toughest events on the face of the planet. I don't feel like being the strongest version of me is a good why anymore. I don't even feel like being able to show my kids that I did something hard to inspire them is really my why anymore, because they've seen that. Frankly, they're a little over Daddy going off and then coming back and showing them the Facebook images from the next Sufferfest that I did.
Do you ever wonder why you wanted to be that strongest version of yourself? Is it because, yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too deep right now, but you ever think it's just like you don't think you're good enough, and I'm like, I got to prove to myself that I actually am good enough?
You know, when you talk about that, a lot of times there are failures in life that cause you to want to become a stronger version of you. I haven't had a huge number of intense failures in life, right? I was never morbidly obese. I never had some horrible disease like cancer that I had to overcome. For me, I think it's more of that primal, instinctual need to be a great leader and to be able to provide for my family, you know, provide, procreate, protect, right? Those are the 3 P's of manhood. And
yeah, so you were doing that before the races, though.
I was doing that before, but you know, and also I'm in fitness, right? Like I'm in nutrition, and this kind of leads into my current why. My why now is to inspire people to greatness, right? So now it's all extrinsic. When I'm out there, there is no make me the strongest version of me. All there is there's people out there on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on social media, waiting for the blog post on my website to teach them about how to do this, thinking about getting out and doing a 5K, or maybe just getting off the couch, or maybe thinking about doing an Ironman, and they need inspiration. They need to see people out there doing this stuff. They need to see me suffering.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
I'm always learning. I am voracious when it comes to learning. Never stop learning. You will stay on top of your game if you're always on the cutting edge of learning.
If you could ring that young 20-year-old Ben up, what would you tell him?